I'll tell you what I think a failure is. If
Sure.
you show
Yeah.
up,
Let's go the opposite direction.
yeah, I think if you show up to Founded in FoCo and uh, somehow nobody says hello or says, hey, let's grab a coffee after this, or reaches out to you in some way, that's going to be a failure. So by definition, the success is people are so welcoming and open and willing to be themselves, warts and all, that I don't know, there's just something about like, hey, we all self-selected to spend these 3 days learning from each other, growing with each other, and really building the Fort Collins community. I think people are just attracted to people who are attracted to that.
Hey, this is Nick Armstrong, and you are watching the Founded in FoCo podcast. Each episode, we get to talk to somebody who is helping us build our entrepreneurial, nonprofit, startup community here, and I can think of nobody better than the head of our social track, Gus. Gus, welcome to the show.
Hey, Nick, thank you for having me. Glad to be back.
Last time you were on the podcast, you were here as a speaker.
That's right. I talked about improv as it could help your business and how you can navigate on-the-spot meetings and in-the-moment choice making.
Well, we're making things up as we go along here in the event for the most part. Actually, we're proud to talk about a brand new extension of the event, Founded in FoCo, which is going to be March 10th through the 14th at the Fort Collins Senior Center, and little specific things happening each day. But we're adding a social track. Gus, tell us about your work on the social track.
Sure. So Charles and Nick, you guys approached me and said, hey, Founded in FoCo is really all about community. And we really want to highlight that this year. Do you have any sorts of ideas on how we could do that? Because, I haven't been here in Fort Collins that long. I've only been here coming up on 2 years. So as someone new to the business space, especially as a beginning entrepreneur who didn't know a lot of people at the beginning, I said, yeah, I do have some ideas how people can start to meet in a more natural and focused way, whether that is through facilitated networking, where someone is actually running the meeting, as opposed to unfacilitated networking, which is sort of like, hey, Gus, thanks for coming to our event. Grab a coffee and go be extroverted. There are some people who really excel at that. But I know for me, as a newcomer to the business space, and Founded in Fort Collins brings tons of newcomers. Like, we have classes and workshops at the 100 level of sort of like, oh, you're thinking about starting a business. That means you probably don't know anybody here. Let's make it really easy for people to meet each other, not only in a business context, but perhaps people are going to walk away from an entrepreneurship conference as friends and partners.
So somebody who practices a lot of improv, did you find it easier to go to those extroverted type events, or do you have a hard limit at some point where you're just like, I can't, there's no more yes-anding that I can do in this moment?
I have a battery for sure that slowly depletes, but sometimes I need to put on a face, and I think that's what drains the battery. Whereas if you can get people to show up as their authentic selves and give them avenues to be their authentic selves, people are going to not only have more fun and be more engaged with such a social event, but they're also going to make more genuine connections.
And I love the idea of having networking that meets the people who are supposed to be networking where they're at, right? So the idea of, if you're an introvert, there will still be things for you to do and ways for you to make those connections and build yourself up. You don't have to be the, extrovert Johnny on the spot type of entrepreneur where you've just got a stack full of business cards and flinging them out like it's payday. You don't have to do that in order to be successful. What were some of the ways that you encountered in your 2 years so far in Fort Collins that were really effective in terms of building and growing your network that you want to bring in and apply to Founded in FoCo?
So one of my favorite events that I've done this year, it's called a 2-hour cocktail party. And This guy, Nick Gray, wrote a book essentially explaining to an alien how to throw a 2 hour cocktail party and how you can use it to leverage and build your network. And some of the things that I took away from that is people don't necessarily dislike networking, they dislike unfacilitated networking. Introverts specifically, where people throw a networking event, they buy a big jug of coffee, and they book a conference room, and they're like, my work here is done. I have thrown a networking event. When in reality, if you're trying to get people to meet each other, you need to be the social leader in charge of making those connections, in charge of reading the room and understanding who is thriving, who may need a little bit more help. So, one of the things Nick Gray does, explains in his book, is instead of, you know, asking questions that could have fun answers, pose a question to the room, a fun question to the room. Because if your question is, hey, where is the coolest place you've traveled? Then you're going to actually drive a wedge between people, because there will be people who grew up being like, well, every year my family went to Santorini, on our private jet. And then you're going to have some people who are like, Denver, I guess. But when you ask a fun question that has an answer that people can relate to, such as, and I think I used this at the very first planning meeting, what was the first job you got paid for? That takes people back to an objective answer where status isn't really a factor, class isn't a factor. All these things that people start to self-select and identify with sort of fade away when you ask, hey, here's a fun question. What is your truthful answer, and how can we connect over that? And I remember the planning meeting really well because Charles had a hard time getting people to shut up and move on with the meeting. And that's exactly what we want to do at Founded in FoCo, is foster such a vibrant community that it's hard to stop them.
Yeah. And we do have a team that loves to talk and get together and engage and do things. 25 of them, in fact. It's really hard to stop that train once it started. So it's a testament to the idea of being together in a community, being together in a room, and still having fun things to say to each other, even though you've already worked on, putting together a really cool event. What are you most excited about in terms of Founded in FoCo this year?
Nick, I love just getting people together, especially people who are really taking a chance on Founded in FoCo, because maybe they haven't been before, maybe they're new to the area, maybe they don't know anybody here, and they're using it as their sort of way of, okay, I am going to commit to myself to be part of this community, and being rewarded for taking that chance, because it doesn't always happen, but being head of the social and networking track, being able to take them into my hit it off session, which is all a bunch of fun questions, silly exercises that will sort of instill and showcase the values around the local business community. Take bold choices, like talk to strangers, be open, be vulnerable, celebrate attempts, not successes. There's all these things that we can wrap into well-facilitated networking events that really brings about change, not only for the individual, but at the community level as well. That's what I'm pumped for.
When you do go to certain like business conferences or other things like that, there's a real like, oh, you must show up as an affect of yourself, right? So you have the suit, you have the tie, you're like there and engaged, the power suit. You are, this version of yourself that is super successful that may not actually exist in the real world.
Yeah.
And the thing that I love most about Founded in FoCo and some of the dynamic interactions that have come out of just like engaging with speakers who are maybe 2 or 3 years ahead of you, but they're still on that same pathway and have been there, done that, got the t-shirt. And they know, where the snags are that led them to duct tape their jeans together or something like that, a particular way. They have an authenticity to them, these connections that form in this way of failure is okay, like stumbles are okay. We're all here in northern Colorado. It's not like the standards are lower, but it's that we're more accepting of the idea that it's not a straight and narrow path to success. There's dips and curves and valleys.
Yeah, that's the beauty of having such a local conference because when you go to some of these other conferences, like some stuff down in Denver, they'll fly people from New York and California and they have 30-year real estate careers, or they'll say, "Oh, here's how sending an email is like how I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro." And I'm like, "That's not, I can't relate to this." But when I go to Founded in FoCo and I meet up with Sarah Rosinski and we get to talk about copywriting and nerd out about grammar and stuff like that, that is when I'm like, "Oh, this is a really unique and special community." Not only for the speakers interacting with the attendees, but the attendees interacting with the attendees. There's something about just sitting down next to someone and knowing, hey, we're in the same place, we're here at the same conference together, and I bet we have similar sort of scrappy values.
So we talked a little bit about you. You've been here for 2 years. You started out as a kind of a participant and a speaker at Founded in FoCo, and then you jumped on the planning team. What was the thing that got you to jump up the line?
I think when you and Charles reached out and said, hey, we're thinking of doing social networking and prioritizing that this year, and you have a lot of opinions. Would you like to come aboard and battle test those opinions? And to be clear, they are opinions because I have thrown events and networking sessions that have gone really well, and I'm able to see sort of what doesn't connect, especially for people who are new. These are not only people who are new to the area, but new to running a business they may have not even started. These are folks who are coming to Founded in FoCo for a reason. New to networking, new to building a business, new to this, that, and the other thing. And if you or if I, and by extension you, if the community can open up our arms and say, hey, you are welcome here, even though you may not have a $50 million business, or you have no employees, or you're just getting started, or you just want to learn, hey, how do I start an LLC in Colorado, or even make my first dollar here in the area. Even it it's exciting to me that we can sort of like tear away the qualifications of expertise and just say, hey, we're all figuring it out as we go, and it's all right to be a beginner.
Yeah, that gatekeeping, right? The gatekeeping of expertise. Not that we're devaluing the expert, but just recognizing that there are so many different pathways to gain that expertise, that each one is a little bit more nuanced that might be applicable for somebody who needs to hear that particular type of advice. And one of the things that I was most excited about was this year's the idea of how speaker selection went. We put it into a blind jury pool and then allowed the track captains to sort of like go through. And you didn't know who was who. You got to see these different talk submissions. And I think that it's really lent itself to some interesting dynamics, new speakers that we haven't necessarily had in the past, and new voices that we're going to hear from this year, not only in just the growth track, the traditional like freelancer and growing, but also nonprofit track. We're going to see a lot of different things that come to be as a result of these elements. The creative track, we just had the podcast with
Oh,
Karen and
nice.
Phil, and there's so many new elements that are coming into play. It's such an evolving event each year. Guess if somebody was sitting on the sidelines and thinking about like that, I don't know if I necessarily want to. I don't know if it's me for should I go to this thing? Like what would you tell them as somebody who's here now joined the team? What would you tell them as somebody who's been there, done that, got the T-shirt in terms of being a newbie in our community and attending this event?
Man, I would say absolutely go. Even if you have no interest in business at all, you're happy with not owning a business. I still think the values, lessons, and community that Founded in FoCo in particular fosters is worth its weight in gold or whatever precious metal you want to use. Just because this event specifically, I think, is so welcoming to newcomers. In the past that I've gone to it, and everyone is going to it in the anticipation that they will meet other folks, and just delineating, hey, here are some sessions for beginners. Here's some sessions for intermediate. Here's some sessions for advanced. By the way, you don't know anybody? Come on to Hit It Off with Gus. Or uh, there's there's a real ethos around the event of community, and I know a lot of conferences say, "Oh, we're trying to engage the community," but this one really does it. Local speakers, local attendees, bonding over their own personhood and their self-interests and their hobbies. And it's not like, there's a reason it's called Founded in FoCo and not small to medium business con in Fort Collins. It's whatever your definition of being a founder is, whether you're founding a business or founding your new life here in Fort Collins, or founding your own local community around your weird interest. It's not just about making money and running a business. It's about really getting to ingratiate with not only tastemakers of the community, but people who share your interests and hobbies and disposition and all these other wonderful qualities that we want you there.
Yeah. And time again, we've seen through, the pandemic, through economic growth and, all of these different things that have happened over the course of, I think it's been about 15 years or so that Founded in FoCo has been around in various iterations. We've seen that the audience and the speakers have this sort of unique bond where everybody kind of appreciates that we're all part of the same community. We all sort of like shop from each other, essentially, whether you're a marketer, a graphic designer, a coffee shop owner, whatever it is. If we know you, we're more likely to do business with you. And you can show up as that perfect entrepreneur, but man, oh man, if you show up as that human and have flaws and quirks and all of these other things that we can appreciate you for, this is the space to do that in, and we'll celebrate you that much more as a business owner or a nonprofit executive or a team member on any of those entities,
or just someone curious.
Yeah. If you were to tell someone what a successful, like, what would be success in your mind for someone showing up to Founded in FoCo the first time?
I'll tell you what I think a failure is. If you show up,
let's go the opposite direction.
Yeah, I think if you show up to Founded in FoCo and somehow nobody says hello or says, "Hey, let's grab a coffee after this," or reaches out to you in some way, that's going to be a failure. So by definition, the success is people are so welcoming and open and willing to be themselves, warts and all, that, I don't know, there's just something about like, hey, we all self-selected to spend these 3 days learning from each other, growing with each other, and really building the Fort Collins community. I think people are just attracted to people who are attracted to that. So I think a success is being part of it. You're going to be welcome. If you want to make sure you be welcome, you can come to the Hit It Off sessions. There's tons of things available to help people meet each other, whether that's, I don't know if you talked to Peter yet, but the exhibit hall, creative track, getting creatives together is always a phenomenal time. And having actual concrete resources for nonprofit, small business, builders, solopreneurs. You're in a room with people who are like you. Say hello, and they will say hello back.
So let's say you're on the introverted side of the spectrum and you're looking at the schedule. Is there a way to tell whether a networking event is more aligned towards an introvert or have we sort of like bridged the gap between those spaces?
I think if you're looking at the schedule, I think there's maybe one or two very intentional facilitated networking tracks where it's going to be, hey, this is actually going to be a lot of like one-on-one time or small group time. Whereas maybe if you're looking towards the more unstructured elements of the conference, like early morning coffee networking, that is going to be, hey, grab a coffee, go be extroverted. But at the same time, I think people confuse networking and I don't want to use schmoozing. And networking events are only a success if you walk out with a fat stack of business cards. But some of the most welcoming and frankly life-changing interactions I've had in Fort Collins, the best networking I've ever done, has always been one-on-one. So you can make your own networking event. One-on-one is a networking event.
So tell me about your business and how you got into either event making or like what is it that specifically got you into like improv and using that as a tool to connect with other people.
Sure. So I like to say the best thing I did for my corporate career was playing pretend for 2 hours a week. So, I wanted to be a funny college kid. And then as I went through the process of taking improv courses, I was realizing that, oh, my thought process is getting more refined and more inclusive of others. Oh, I'm really good at making my scene partner or perhaps my teammates look good in presentations. I'm acting with more empathy. My active listening is being trained just doing these funny skits and sketches. So once I realized that, I said, well, there's this pernicious myth that public speaking is the only communication skill that you can grow. And I think that's completely backwards. The public speaking is good if you want to speak to a room of people, but if you're interested in influencing and running a team and leadership and on the spot decision making, you might want to take an improv course. Now, same thing, networking is a dirty word, but well facilitated networking is not. Improv is a dirty word, but well facilitated improv is not. So essentially what I've done is distill improv techniques and practices that can be used to help teams work together better, to help individuals train these more nuanced communication skills. And then sometimes I get invited into cohorts and conferences to run what I call social kickoffs, to instill the values of your event into participants at the very beginning. And I really like doing that.
The reason I bring all this up is because it's such an intentional way to have built an organization and to build a foundation for networking between different folks, right? So we're very purposeful about if things might seem accidental because they vary so much year to year, but we're very purposeful about the types of expertise that we bring in and engage with, and how a social track comes to be is through expertise like Gus just elaborated on. So it's really refreshing to have things that are purposeful because you can just throw together a networking event and cross your fingers and hope that the community shows up for it. And you might get some good, connections from extroversion in that way. But a really purposeful, specific built for the community type of facilitated event or one-on-one interactions, other things like that, introductions, down to how the volunteers interact with you and greet you at the door. All of these things are built in and baked in on purpose to the event. And so that's why we're so glad to have you on the team, Gus.
Thank you, Nick. It's been a real pleasure to be able to participate in this way. And I'm super excited to see how it adds to the conference in March. Oh, that's soon.
March is very soon. Yeah. March 10th through the 14th. There's various things that will happen. The schedule's still being refined, and you'll see that come through on our website at foundedinfoco.com. Definitely check that out for the most recent information and news about what's happening in and around the schedule. And check out the social track. Be sure to show up, even if you are an introvert. There is going to be things for you to do and enjoy in ways that are not draining to you, which is awesome. It's always going to be at this Fort Collins Senior Center and different maybe kickoff events here and there. But just keep an eye on the schedule, and that's the way to know when to show up and make sure that somebody takes you out to coffee at least once during the event.
That's right. That's a success.
Otherwise,
that'll
we
be
have to call the whole thing a failure. It's just going to be a mess. Gus, any last words of wisdom for a watcher out there?
Come on through. You won't regret it. You'll have a great time.
Hey, thanks for listening. I'm Nick Armstrong, and this is a Founded in FoCo podcast. For more great interviews like this one, join us at foundedinfoco.com.